Hi, and welcome to Two Guys Philosophise with Sean Blake and Peter Wise. Today's episode we have entitled Fear. Right, okay. Please do remember to subscribe to our channel and enjoy.
So hello everybody, it's us again, Two Guys Philosophise. And by philosophise we mean talk a lot of what is often nonsense, but what is often quite interesting as well. One thing I want you all to be aware of is this. We have times where we completely forget what we're talking about. We call it a brain fog. You know, I don't know if you relate to that. You're suddenly talking about something, you've completely forgotten what your point was that you were going to make. So you'll have to learn to deal with it, and so will we. The other thing that happens is that we often say things, and then when we watch back the podcast, we think, "What the?
Oh my God! What was I saying?
That was completely a load of rubbish." So we do talk rubbish, but as I say, we share some interesting stuff, and we hope you enjoy. Anyway, Sean. Fear, panic, distress, anxiety, depression, despair, stress, worry, nervousness, terror, horror, bewilderment, confusion, shocked, hopelessness, jittery, uncertain, doubtful.
So
fear.
We are dealing with surface things today.
Okay. Now we are talking about. Well, we're talking about.
Whoa, surface things. That's quite like heavy. But this is an area. I mean, this is an area that you are way more educated in than I am. I'm more of an experiencer, whereas you're more of a fear.
All right. What are your
the person who studied the thing? But the interesting question that was posed this morning is when we were just having our little preamble kind of chat, is what is fear? And I've got to say that I have a little bit of an issue trying to understand what fear is in the classical sense. I mean, can you explain on a physiological level what happens when you fear?
Somebody gets
when
afraid.
You fear,
Okay.
yeah.
First of all, speak a bit louder, because otherwise my voice is so powerful and booming and grandiose that I will simply overcome you. So, you know, at its most basic level, fear is a reaction to something that is happening either inside you or around you, or something you perceive to be happening inside you or around you. Now, there's been a lot of debate on whether or not, on how fear is actually manifested in the body. For example, you see a tiger, let's say. What happens is that your senses, or supposedly this is what happens, is that your senses, first of all your eyes probably will take in the light and the information, and your brain will translate that into that is a tiger, and because you've learnt all your life to be scared of tigers, you will probably feel terrified.
Right.
So the thing that interests me is what happens first. Is it the thought that comes from your mind, which does not reside in your body, that causes the chemical reactions to happen? Or is it the chemical reactions happening in your body, such as adrenaline, you know, your pupils dilate or your blood,
skin flushes,
and all of these kind of things. So is it the thought of, you know, is that what you first comprehend? Is that what first hits your system? And then everything else happens? Or do all your chemicals change and then you suddenly feel this thing which we call fear, and then that becomes a thought, I feel fear?
Okay. Is fear not an instinct?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a very, very primal instinct.
We have common phobias through our species, and those are ingrained kind of in us already. They're irrational fears. So I think that we need to try and understand the different types of fear.
Okay.
Because there's the fear that happens when somebody has a gun to your head.
Mm-hmm.
There's the fear that happens when you realize that you're going to die, because we're all mortal. There's the fear that happens when you realize that there is no God and that you're living in a totally chaotic universe. There's the fear that everyone has in their everyday life, their anxiety, are they going to lose their job? So fear encompasses a lot. So feeling fear, what does that mean? Do we not feel fear all the time? Is it not always in the back of our head?
Now this is the question. I think we do. I think we live our lives in fear, even if we don't recognise it, and we'll come back to that.
I'm fearful I can't pay my rent at the end of the month.
Don't interrupt me. Don't interrupt me.
Sure. No, that's cool.
Right. But what I wanted to ask, going back to what you said, fear being a very primitive response.
Yeah.
I wonder when man, or beast, but probably man, became conscious of being afraid. Because you have a primitive response, obviously, to predators or to bad things that are happening around you, even as an animal. And that primitive response is called fear. But when did man first feel frightened on a conscious level? Does an ape or a monkey or our closest primate say, I think to itself, I feel frightened? Or is that just a natural instinct? Has consciousness made us aware of our own fear?
I think that lower primates and animals have instinct, and that causes them to fear the snake and the so what I'm saying is I think fear existed way before consciousness, and probably
I have to interrupt. How did fear exist before consciousness?
Because even as a microbe, you won't go in a certain direction because that's not good for you, and you'll go in that direction toward the light.
So you're talking about
even on that level of consciousness, there's a fear to go there. Otherwise, it would go that way.
Okay. So we're talking about different levels.
So there's
of
different
consciousness.
levels, and fear I think applies differently to the different levels.
Okay.
And I think it also has a lot to do with who you are and how you handle fear.
There we go. Yeah, well, it's a strange thing because in this day and age, the standard greeting when you see somebody is "How are you?" and the standard answer is "Fine." When people clearly aren't fine, we all go around wearing masks.
Yeah.
The whole time.
Yeah.
And most, the biggest mask that we wear is the one to hide our fear. Because underneath it all, you say, I'm fine. Fine stands for fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. Okay.
Yeah.
Most people are not fine. But if you ask somebody how you're doing and they say, I'm so scared because this is going to happen, that you're going to go, oh no, don't bother, don't bother telling me your story.
Exactly. That's one of those empty things we just say to each other.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And it all aids us to hide our fear. Now, I think, we're still evolving. Consciousness is still evolving with us. And I think soon we'll be able to learn to deal with our fears in a different way, particularly our irrational fears. Because we are filled with irrational fears, or at least I should say I am filled with irrational fears. For example, my son is coming to visit here in 2 weeks, and I'm actually, I could say nervous. But that's fear, that's a form of fear. I'm actually nervous about when he comes because I'm thinking I'm going to have to take him to places. Now where can I take him? How am I going to entertain him? And all those kind of things. So that sort of little worry is another fear.
Yeah.
And every little worry is another fear. And we're full of fear. And we deny it.
We deny it, yes, but not only that, we hide it. We hide it from ourselves and we hide it from other people because nobody wants to deal with an insecure person. Nobody wants to deal with a person who the first thing they say when you meet them is, oh my God, no, I'm not having a good day.
Yeah.
Okay, I got on the bus this morning. I forgot my bus card. I mean, by that time, you've already tuned out to the whole conversation. So it's a societal.
Yeah, I think we
train to hide our fear. We train to portray the mask you were talking about. We train to.
So you're saying again that's a societal demand. We cannot be seen to be afraid.
To be afraid is to be weak. To admit
Yeah.
to being afraid is to be weak, especially for men.
And that, to me, is absolute bollocks. Because if you are afraid, you should say I'm afraid, and then you might get help. If you keep your mouth shut, you might not.
Yes, yeah.
But,
I'm afraid because I'm surrounded by 6 threatening people, and I need to speak up and phone 911 or whatever the number may be in your specific country. But that's an immediate fear, and it's not a fear that attacks your psychology. It's real, it's imminent, it's there. But if I fear leaving my house...
Yes. Well, there's phobias. Plenty of phobias. I can give you a list of at least 500 phobias of, which are irrational fears of something, whether they be spiders or doors or... snakes,
whatever. Why do people? So
Well,
there's another level of fear. So there's phobias. Which would you say that phobias were instinctual?
Phobias are an overreaction to something that has happened to a person consciously or subconsciously. A person can develop a fear of spiders if they've been bitten by a spider, or a person can develop a phobia of spiders.
But we're all scared of the dark. We're all scared of the boogeyman in the cupboard. We have those we're all scared of spiders.
So that's
there's no one that
interesting.
really goes and picks up a spider. We know they're not really that dangerous. I mean, logically, but nobody really goes and picks one up, or nobody embraces snakes or reptiles.
No, fair enough. But what you said there, that word boogeyman, it got me thinking that we're actually taught fear from a very, very early age as a method of
survival.
I was going to say actually as a method of our parents being able to control us.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that on a bigger level, is the same method that governments around the world use to control their people. They tell, just as a parent would say, if you don't go to bed now, the boogeyman will come get you. I mean,
it's a strategy to keep you in line. It's nothing.
That's a terrible thing to say to a child. The poor little toddler, lies in his bed, dead scared, needs a nightlight on, needs to have his door left open, wakes up every 20 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because he's scared. Couldn't there be a better way for parents to be able to control their children without... obviously there's other fairy stories that you learn, the Tooth Fairy, the Easter Bunny, and lots of other things that you eventually understand are not real. But we're born, and when we're born, Sean, my friend, fear is born alongside us.
Well, we have to be. We have to be terrified to be separated from this very safe and secure environment called the womb, and then thrown out into this cold world where you're separate to everything else. And it must be a horrifying experience. And I'm sure newborns are purposely programmed not to fear that for some reason, because that would be traumatic, I would think.
Yeah. I'm just thinking again back to what I said at the beginning about when the first man, because we've talked. So we've covered quite a few things in our previous podcast. We've talked about magic mushrooms, we've talked about the primitive brain, the development of the brain, we've talked about evolution, we've talked about consciousness, we've talked about the quantum field of potentiality and all those kind of big words. And I'm still most interested in when a person first said, I feel afraid. Was that him acknowledging his chemical responses in his body to fear and saying, okay, this is a feeling I'm getting, I'm going to call this fear?
You're talking as if fear just kind of evolved into our species or into other species.
We feel much more fear than any other animal.
Yeah, okay, so So, all right. So we've evolved that fear, and you're saying that other animals don't have that specific kind of fear, that fear consciousness. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I don't believe other animals have a fear consciousness, but I believe we do. But it's quite interesting, though, what you're saying, because is fear evolving? I think, especially with regard to irrational fears, people are becoming, I don't know if it's wiser or calmer. That's CALMER, not KARMA. You know, people are becoming calmer these days. But or maybe it's just because I'm a therapist and everybody talks to me about their fears. But I think people are coming to recognise that subconsciously or even consciously, they are scared about a lot of things in this world.
Yeah.
And the next step in the evolution for man would be able to distinguish between silly irrational fears, which might come up in a nightmare of an event that happened 25 years ago, and not let that ruin your whole day, you know, into a place, we're evolving into a place where we can deal with fear, we can separate rational fear from irrational fear. And, you know, I can't see a time where if there's a human being, there'll always be emotions, I suppose.
I think that's what we are as humans. We are a bundle of emotions.
Bundle of emotions.
Yeah, I think that's what we're supposed to be. I think that's what consciousness is, a bundle of emotions. It works itself out.
Right.
Sorry, you were saying fear.
Well, I was just saying about fear evolving.
Evolving,
the fear evolving to a place where we're. You go ahead.
Now, if fear is evolving, why am I still experiencing fear in a world that contains very little immediate fear? I can understand being fearful when you see the saber-toothed tiger taking action, killing it, getting rid of it, moving, whatever, and then that fear has gone. But why do we today live in a space of fear that no one can explain? It's not a saber-toothed tiger. You're not depressed because the crops aren't producing this year. You're not scared of your future for any other reason. Today you're fine, you're okay, you're fine, but yet you fear the future. What?
Yeah.
So that is fear too. So should we get over fear? Does fear in one sense motivate us to better ourselves? And are there maybe not two kinds of fear? The immediate fear of the saber-toothed tiger, which I think we today get confused with the fear of our normal fears. So what I'm saying to you is big things become way bigger than they should. Sorry, the dog's snoring.
Our little doggy always
is like
snores.
so cute.
Get used to it.
So I think that there are two levels of fear. There's that instinctual fear, and then that is the
instinctual fear and the conscious fear.
Conscious fear.
But I think, underneath it all is the fear of death. And by the time we're 5 years of age, we know we're going to die one day, and by the time we're 12, we've processed that information. So with whatever we're doing, on any day we may be as happy as Larry, still in our subconscious lies the greatest fear of all, the fear of death. Now, the fear of death is actually only really a fear of the unknown, and in any situation in life we're afraid of the unknown, but the fear of death is the greatest of all. I think fear also has a lot to do with how attached you are to things in this world. The reason people have so many more fears than ancient man did is because a lot of people in this world have got a lot of stuff. They feared that they're going to crash their car, that their chair leg's going to break, light bulbs are going to pop. A million and one different things. Their email didn't come through that they sent. They're waiting for a message from somebody. The builder didn't turn up today. The garden wall's falling down. All of these fears are because of all of these things we've got. And actually, the Buddha himself was first, I think, not the first, but one of the greatest known men to understand that thing. If you become attached to worldly goods and to things on this earth, even if you become attached to yourself,
please
then
remember that
suffer
for me.
fear. We can answer now.
Okay. Well, what I was busy writing down while you were speaking is, and I'm going to speak from purely personal experience. There is fear, and then there is terror, and I've realised that now that we've been speaking.
Okay.
Through this. Because I said to Peter earlier, I don't really think I experience fear in the same way as other people experience fear, but I think I said that because I didn't understand what you meant by fear and the difference between fear and terror with relation to my situation. So, for me, I have had a terrifying episode happen where I was not in control. The not being in control was the most fearful. I could deal with everything else. I could deal with absolutely everything else that happened in that situation, but the total loss of your autonomy, you not being able to get out of the situation, nothing you can say, nothing you can do, nothing you can preempt, nothing you can... that feeling of hopelessness, that feeling of shit, there's nowhere out of it, there's no place out of it. That to me was fear. That was terror.
Terror.
So I'm looking at fear as terror, and I'm hearing you now. Fear in a lesser, kind of to a lesser extent than.
But I still think it boils down to the fact that ultimately we're scared to die. Especially, you think about a typical street fight situation. Some people are less scared than others and will fight. Some people won't fight or won't fight so well. But at least one of those two parties is going to be in fear for his life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Every time a boxer enters a boxing ring, he knows that his life is at risk. He knows
every time you go to Pick and Pay, the shopping centre, your life is at risk. You might...
Yeah, it's true. So again, I say it's ultimately the fear of death that underlines everything, and we add on top of it all these little tiny fears, these genuine fears. If you happen to get confronted by a tiger, I don't know what I'd do. I'd probably do a song and dance. That might help. But there's a further aspect to fear as well, which affects the world in a great way, and that is to do with how governments use fear to control the people. And the thing is, in this day and age, we know that now. We know that our government is not necessarily working in our best interests. We know that governments can be sly and selfish and lie and do anything they want, basically, and we might not get to know about it, although nowadays we do get to know about these leaked reports and strange things that are going on. But governments, by and large, around the world keep the population
they use
in fear.
as they weaponized fear. They've weaponized one of our primal instincts. At this stage of our evolution, we should not have that kind of fear. We live in a technological world where there should not be any problem with food, there should not be any problem with housing, there should be not be any problem with water, there shouldn't be any problem with anything. But you're right, but it's not only governments, it's corporations. Don't eat butter. Butter will give you...
Oh my God!
Butter will give you cholesterol. You will die. You will...
don't get me onto that.
Fear.
Yeah.
Because fear is a strong motivator. Fear will get you out of bed in the morning. And that's why I asked the question earlier, is fear not something that we need in our lives? Is fear not something that we need?
We do need it in our lives, but not to the extent that we are so scared that we're not going to look good, or we're going to use our youthful looks, let's say, when we reach the age of around 40, that we'll walk into a chemist and have a selection of 100 different body lotions, right? All of them have basically got a couple of natural ingredients. All of them are basically the same, and all of them will do fuck all to turn the clock back for you in your life.
Thank you for saying that. I am going to interrupt because I am going to forget what I'm going to say. But don't you think that fear of death is linked very closely to loss of ego? Because everything that you've spoken about now is ego-based.
Yeah.
When you die, like you've just spoken about everything that is ego-based. You haven't once mentioned the fear of where you're going.
Right.
You haven't once mentioned the fear of maybe being judged or being... Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're saying, and
loss of ego.
I had a very interesting question to ask, but I've completely forgotten what it was. So I think
we'll just carry on.
Yeah. Well, we'll take a short break now, and we'll see you just in a moment. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that was quick. We are back already, and we left off by talking about fear and the ego. And of course, yes, fear is linked to the ego, as are all other emotions.
Yeah.
And you also said, before we carry on though, I just want to tell you the reason I'm sitting right over on this side of the screen is because Sean usually gesticulates like a madman. So we especially gave him some extra room, but he's being nice and quiet today. So,
yeah, and I'm being very respectful.
Get those arms working. So fear and the ego and all emotions, I think ultimately are connected to an ego. But the question I'd like to know the answer to is, do emotions create actual energy which manifests in this world that we live in? I believe it does, because emotions are connected to thoughts, and thoughts do create energy. That I think that's been proven. I don't know how. Somebody enlighten me on that subject. The other thing that also interests me is this: the reason why I think that thoughts carry vibrations and emotion carry vibrations, which is like energy, if you like. If you're confronted by a person in the street who wants to pick a fight with you, and he's this very, very scary guy, okay, there is no physical contact between you two, yet you exhibit the fear response. So he is putting out aggression towards you. That is another emotion.
But fear aggressive. Is a warning as opposed to an emotion.
But what I'm getting at is there's no physical contact. There's nothing except the vibrations to carry his feeling to a place where it affects you. Now, how is that possible without any physical connection? Or what else would you have to say on that?
All right, look. So on your first point, which was emotions and creating, if you look at any of the Magic with a K texts or things like The Secret, books like that, the manifestation books, what they will all have in common is that for you to manifest anything in this reality, you have to put intent, emotion, and passion behind the intent.
Oh, yes.
Okay. All right.
Deep passion.
So do emotions create your environment? On a very basic level, if I get out of bed in a bad mood and I meet everyone in a bad mood, they're going to meet me back in a bad mood. That's my personal experience.
But that goes around worldwide.
Yes. Yeah. So they did an experiment which is very well known. I wish I had the name for the experiment, where they actually took a few hundred people and they meditated on peace and harmony, and for the next 24 hours crime stats went down, all kinds of violent crimes went down and things like that. So on a sort of from a macro to a micro level, yes, I think definitely.
So putting out
so.
thoughts of peace and good energy actually did have an effect.
I think that thoughts can have an effect. That particular experiment backfired, though, because they discovered after they completed the experiment, everything kind of overcompensated. So the violent crimes, everything kind of overcompensated. So there is a theory that there is balance in the world. There is balance. We need a certain amount of everything to counteract white, black, and so on. So the more fear you bring in, the more bliss you bring in. The more bliss you bring in, the more fear you bring in. To balance this dichotomy world that we live in.
You mentioned something last time about an experiment being done in Portugal with the hallucinogenic mushrooms, and people being in a great state of peace and crime rates going down. So, I don't know. It sounds quite similar.
It's going to be very interesting now that they've legalized magic mushrooms in Canada. To see how that affects their society. That would be very interesting.
But anyway, coming back to fear. Fear is a choice. What do you think? If you
continuation of fear is maybe a choice.
Yes.
I get a fright. I'm aware of the danger. That's where the fear should end.
Right.
As far as I'm concerned.
Well, it does with animals. That's exactly what happens.
But for some reason, we don't let go of fear.
Yeah, we don't let go of fear. Why not?
Why not?
We've got to learn to let go of fear. I don't know. We are very, very complex organisms. Over my lifetime, I've learned to let go of a lot of fear, a lot of, like I say before, all the other words, the anxiety, the stress, the worry, the nervousness, and all of these things, and the confusion. And life has become much simpler for me, so, I don't have to suffer fear so much. But, like I say, is fear a choice? Is it a subconscious choice? You saying if it's prolonged, then you can say you're consciously choosing to prolong this fear so you can feel a certain way, which is the way you're used to feeling all your life, which may be very uncomfortable.
Well, I think everyone is born in fear, and I think that's the way that they go through life. I think there has to be some level of fear because that motivates people to a certain way. But fear is essentially a survival mechanism. It's a tool, and once it's served its purpose, we should be able to put it down. Yet we don't put that tool down. We live in that fear.
Maybe that's something to do with our genes. I mean, do you think fear? Do you think people have a genetic propensity to be more fearful?
Here's something I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent. But why is it that the human mind might achieve fantastic things during the day? You might win a prize, make a new friend, whatever. But there was one incident at the traffic light that really upset you. Now, for that whole evening, your brain is going to be focusing on that one incident at the traffic light. Why can we not program ourselves to look back at our days and go, hey, today wasn't about the traffic light. Okay? Yeah. Today was about that lovely person I've met.
Some people can do that. Some people can do that. Something happens and then it's gone in the past and they can forget about it. I mean, I've had great difficulty with letting go of stuff of my past. But I want to talk about perhaps something that I would call the biggest con of all time, and that is the fear of God, which is, in my opinion, a completely irrational fear. You cannot be afraid of something that does not exist. It's clear that
which means it's not really a fear of God. You're projecting your fear onto a thing called God.
Yeah.
But what in my mind, and I haven't let you finish, I'm sorry, I'm working on this.
Go for it.
But fear.
Now you've got a brain fog.
Now I got a brain fog.
Right. Does that mean I can carry on until you
can carry on for about the next sentence until I remember what I was supposed to say and then say it.
So I was saying that the fear of God is completely irrational because God doesn't exist, and it's the biggest con of all time for preachers and religious leaders to tell their congregants or whatever that unless they follow their words, which are the words of God, that all nasty and terrible things are going to happen to them. This is perhaps the worst fear of all. It's ingrained into our children from a very young age, but I think we are moving away from a single God-based world, and people are understanding that it's through the vibrations that everything came into existence. We don't know how, but we can no longer attribute it to this God. And for those people that are religious and do believe in a single God, they must live in fear all their lives.
Well, yes, they must, but I think that everyone, whether they believe in a God or not, must ask themselves what happens to me when this physical body ends. And if you don't have a belief structure, if you don't have a thought on it, that must be a really, really scary thing, because essentially I don't think people think about where they're going when they die. It's not that they worry about how they're going to die, when they're going to die, through what means they're going to die, but they don't really get past that to where they're going, what's going to happen to them, how are things going to happen, what will materialize. They never get past that thing. And I think that fear, if you look closer at it, is the fear of losing your ego, of losing the I.
Yes.
Because
it always comes down to that.
Because in my experience of fear, the only time I felt it is when I felt like I lost my I felt like I lost my thing. So I think it's ingrained in us that we are this ego, and when we die, we're not going to be this anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, so we would like to believe in this anthropomorphic, like, afterlife where everyone looks like us, we're going to look the same, we're just going to wear white robes, and there's going to be and that's all really ego. That's all really wanting to carry on what's already carrying on.
Yeah.
So is it fear of death or fear of ego? Because if you're really religious, you don't believe that you're going to go to heaven. You should be happy that you're going to die. You shouldn't be fearful of death.
Well, I don't know. Some people are so specific as to what they want to do to how to worship, ritual and custom wise. That they generally they think they have to get everything absolutely right, otherwise they're not going to make it to that wonderful place in the sky where God sits on his lovely cloud. But if I could sit with a religious person, write it down. If I could sit with a religious person and say to you, look, you see, we cling very strongly to our belief systems.
Very.
I don't know why. There's no point, and you can't argue with somebody. You're not going to change their mind just by trying to enforce your point of
You'll
view.
do the opposite.
But if I could sit with a religious person and say, look, if you will be willing to drop your belief systems, take on my belief systems concerning death, I can guarantee you that you will be a lot less scared.
Okay.
That person wouldn't change their belief systems anyway, but why not? I don't know.
If I was a Christian, which I was, and it was a long journey for me to get out of that specific energy, I would have an answer for you. I'd have that Christian answer for you.
Yeah.
So religion justifies everything. It's you can't argue with a person who is religious, because there is always a text or a whatever.
Yeah, but I think it's the same. It works the same the opposite way. No person who's religious will be able to convince me there's a God.
Exactly. Exactly. It's a protection mechanism on both parts.
Yeah.
I mean, for somebody to come from a background where you're going to die, there's going to be a Heavenly Father, He's going to take you into heaven, and everything's going to be sorted out, to going to an understanding where you're going to die.
Yeah.
As for a person in a Christian frame of mind, is not only a shock, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's a terrifying thought, because again, I wanted to bring in the ego. This whole Christ thing and going to heaven and living the perfect, and harps, and that's all aesthetic, that's all ego, that's all made up.
So
it's all the wanting to continue what this is.
So
and this is not going to be there anymore.
The problem is death, and well, a problem, but it happens to all of us, so how hard can it be? But because we don't know what happens after we're all going to die, even the person who says, no, I'm totally unafraid of death, I couldn't quite believe him. There must be some sort of there must be some sort of fear somewhere, even if it's only slight, of what happens when you die, because there is a chance that your consciousness may continue somewhere else as you, or in a different form, but still as you, intermingled, changed. So I think the fear of death is why the religious preachers have been able to pull the wool over people's eyes for so long. If you die but you've been listening to me all your life, you'll go to heaven. If you die but you haven't listened to what I've told you, then you'll go to hell.
And you're going to hell. But these churches and religions that are becoming outdated kind of models to work by. The more advanced theologians these days are leaning more toward the scriptures being metaphorical and so on. So that even that's kind of changing.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Look, I mean, coming back again, we're going to finish up fairly soon, but coming up again, the fear, or that we live with every day. I don't know. Are you and me just talking from our points of view? Are there millions of people out there who are perfectly happy and who don't worry about anything ever?
Well, you see, this is why I find this podcast very fascinating, because when I walked into this, I had an idea of what fear was. I had this idea of fear, and that was, you scared. You get scared. Okay, that's fear. But through our conversation, I've realized that there's so much more to it. There's so much more to fear. There's so many different levels of fear. There's existential fear, there is religious fear, there is societal fear, there are your own ingrained fears, there are your phobias that you might have picked up.
It's madness.
So it's crazy. What we went into this morning, I thought was literally going to take 15 minutes.
Stop it.
Like all these papers over here. So it's a very in-depth topic, but I think one thing that we do have consensus on, and that fear has got a lot to do with ego. Do we?
Yes, I think we do. The ego is a very complicated construct. I mean, it was first talked about by the ancient Greeks, Aristotle or somebody like that, who first used the term. Then René Descartes. René Descartes wrote about the ego in one of his works, and Sigmund Freud, of course, opened up a variety of different explanations and channels regarding the ego. But yes, it is about the death of the ego. That is for another podcast. And I think we said all about. We said what you see. This is what I mean. I just talk gibberish.
It's not gibberish. Okay, I mean, please, and please, I just want to say this to our audience, or one of you, which is probably my mother. Okay, I don't know what I'm talking about, quite seriously. And Peter and I will look back at these conversations we have, and I'll go, "Oh my God, why did I say that's just a stupid freaking thing to say? What on earth?" That's not true. But essentially, what we want you to understand is we're having a conversation. We're not trying to prove anything. We're not trying to slag anyone. We're not trying to make any point. We just feel that we have interesting conversations and we'd like you to be involved. Yeah. I would love to hear what your opinion is about all this. I'd love to, in the comments, have you tell us what do you feel. There's got to be people out there there are people out there that are 100 times more clever than I am. That could
more cleverer
than I am. That could possibly put what I'm trying to comprehend into 2 sentences for me. And I'd love that. Please do that if you can.
We've always got a lot to talk about, but we're always thinking on our feet. So maybe we need new feet. And on that note, Sean,
are we saying
we'll call it a day?
Are we saying calling it a day? Okay, it's a day. Bye.
See you next time.
Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll catch you next time. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, and you all have a lovely day.